John Talks, Episode 9, Being a Creator, the optimum design of man. The Word made flesh, making the Word. The chicken becoming the egg. The full application of the universe working through man. Conscious validation of the life principle, of which there are degrees. I've been being a creator for decades now. Looking back on it, it's tough to tell exactly when it got to the level of it being externally recognized. That's where I'm pausing. I'm kind of thinking about it. I mean, in the philosophical sense, every human being's a creator. Like, every being's a creator. And because if you're in the physical reality, just being in it makes you a creator, because then you're sending off ripples of effect vibes everywhere. In the context that this John Talk is about is being a conscious creator as a human being, and that being an expression of a conscious sentient being who's aware that they're in a universe that can be interacted and created with, thus engaging in the act of creation consciously with intent. Which is why I open up saying that it's the optimum design of man. Like, activated is to be a creator, to be a creator being. And I'd say there's certainly degrees of it, because the degrees by which one becomes aware of their creating then do feed onto it and strengthen it until the awareness grows. And some might even say that that is the process of growing awareness or awareness growth. So expansion of self also, until one gets to a level where the ideas of like growth in that sense are no longer relevant, and it's just because at those levels the scale doesn't exist in the way that we perceive them here. And then it really becomes about connection to source, connection through dimensions, connection through all the different existential layers, and then ultimately connection to the other souls that are existing in the reality with you. And I say souls because obviously other humans, and obviously when you get onto the ground, like, yeah, those are my friends, and it's not all this philosophical deep thinking sense of the, connection in the deepest sense. It's more you're just in the moment, but it still is that. And I say souls because it certainly includes animals. And I can say that because I lived a life that had a dawning awareness of the sentience of animals. So in the early years, not being as aware, thinking like a lot of animals are basically just animatronic beings in the environment with like no real soul to them or whatever. Or, if they did, it was more like a battery powering that little animal, not much of a sensing, feeling soul on the inside. And, that's a growing, dawning awareness of those. And I've noticed the correlation between my becoming more aware of them and better to them, and interactions and realities unfolding with them, up to and including the fact that there are wise animals, and there are intelligent animals, and there are animals who have the capability to communicate with me as a human being. And the reward for recognizing the fact that they're also possible to being awake in the reality with me is that I got to start having more experiences with them in all manner. Not also, once again, not just like in the deep, like, oh my God, this animal's talking to me or whatever, but also in the just more casual stuff, like more cats will let me pet them, you know? Like when I go to the park, more birds hang out with me or let me see them. Because sometimes all you just need is for something to let you see them to make your day a little better. I've been going through a day, and when I see a bird, kind of makes my day. Like, oh, I didn't think I'd see that kind of bird, or I think I'd see this thing today, and that's kind of cool. So when it comes to creating, it includes everything. So the animals for sure. It also includes the plants and the flowers, the flora and the fauna, because they also have awareness in them, and a lot of them are like shockingly alive in this reality. Once again, dawning awareness. So growing up thinking plants were basically inanimate objects. And then getting to a point where they're very much alive and they very much house a soul, to varying degrees. Once again, this reality is all about there's varying degrees of sentience and varying degrees of awareness and how much of a soul is in a thing that's like feeling it. But I forget if it was like Socrates or Plato, but one of them, they basically got down to the molecular level, energetic, unified, pantheistic God frequency, Higgs boson field, and said, yeah, everything has a bit of that in it, whether it looks inanimate or not. And if you connect to that, you'll see that it is vibrating and it's very much alive. Now, its level of sentience, its level of awareness and interaction with reality and varies, totally varies. But once I realized that, I realized like when I go up to certain objects, I can connect to them because I fundamentally respect their existence in the material reality. And for whatever reason, probably because of quantum mechanics, they say the awareness activates all this stuff and that it actually creates the reality. Awareness, focus, and the Buddhists call it concentration. It's the last step in their 12-step process is concentration, which is putting all of this and wrapping it up and focusing it into a moment, into the reality, and materializing things, creating things, being a creator. So everything in reality is comprised of that energy. So everything in the reality, to varying degrees, has that operating principle uniting it. I think it's safe to say that's love. Like when you open up your heart to the unified field of the universe, that's what you're feeling. But it has more articulated forms in terms of like something's a pillow or something's a dog or something's a human being. And that unveils itself as the playground of this particular reality. And so engaging in being a creator is you have to be a being that's aware that it's a being in the reality and that the reality itself is creatable and that it was created and that it is a current creation that can be added to. And that it's continuing and that there are ways to do it. And once you get into that, that's why I say there's degrees, because you enter into it and then, okay, you're doing certain levels of creation and then they can grow in scale and then they can vary in size or genre or whatever. They can be artistic, they can be architectural, they can be ideological. I mean, there's infinite ways to do it. That's the whole point of living in infinity. And you get a lot of options. And then, it turns out there's different laws and principles regarding those things because they become more purely energetic and in tune with the inner space that we also occupy. Then the inner space, you start to see the correlation between the inner space work and the external space manifestations. And then that's basically, when you're a creator, that's basically what they start saying, your style is that translation of the potential into the kinetic. So, for me, I tried it in a bunch of different ways. I've been the last 20 plus years, I've been doing arts and entertainment. So it's been in the form of characters and comedy albums and music albums and books of poetry and street performing and internet videos and films and internet series and writing and editing and books and gosh, like so much stuff, honestly. And just real life stuff. Um, so many different forms of creation, because once I did enough initial creations and I got them to enough people, because I've been creating things that have influenced hundreds of millions. I mean, at this point, like, if you include like impressions and like direct and indirect and like how much of a tone I've set for certain major websites and people I've worked with and produced and influenced and da 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 da, I've definitely influenced billions of people in my time on Earth so far, consciously, through arts and entertainment. And it's been highly enlightening. Because it's definitely a feedback loop. And the better I got at it, the better the scale went. And then if the scale was big and I wasn't doing it right, I had to pay the toll for that one. Like, there's no escaping that. And but ultimately did enough cycles of it and got aware enough of it, essentially using the scientific method as a recursive learning loop, that it just became who I was. And then it just became how, before I would say, oh, I'm a human being. Now I also look at myself as I'm a creator being. And it's just because now it just happens just because I exist, which is a responsibility unto itself. And in becoming a creator being, there was an intermediary step where I went from like human being to, I had to become a universal being so that I could understand things and harmonize and get to energetic understandings of things at the core of all things. And then the application of the things that I learned in becoming a universal being, which for me was like mainly the discipline that really gave me that was Buddhism, which I practiced for more than a decade. And it was perfect. Existential discipline and divine wisdom and really just universality is really what it allows for. And in my case also, I needed to learn patience, and so Buddhism also allowed for the learning of the practice of Zen, which is when you've identified patience as a weak point, engaging on the path of Zen is like, it's a hilariously frustrating experience at first, as you might imagine. But that was part of having to go universal. Those were necessary, like a astronaut putting on a spacesuit or something, or there's like it's a discipline that one needs in order to traverse further into being a universal being. Then I didn't even know that creator being was going to be what else was on the path. I was just focused on getting self-discipline, and then you know how it goes. Then you get into the flow, and the Buddhists talk about that too. They say, once you get into the flow, it's inevitable that you get enlightened. It's just a matter of how many lives, or if you're in the current life, where it's going to happen. And so the more self-discipline that one can install in order to navigate these things, the better the chances are to, consciously get there within the life. And then, return trip, get back in and be like, okay, now I'm creating, and I know where it comes from, and I know that it's a law of physics. I think that's like, it demystifies it. I think you go on this, I went on this like really, deep mystical journey, and on the return trip, it's like, okay, great. And now you can demystify it so that you can just do it without getting blown away by it all the time. Because there's other things that come along with it. When you start doing that, then you can manifest things in the reality, and events happen, and meetings happen, and people happen, and events happen, and things you can't predict happen, right? Because the universe has a reflexive property. The reality itself has a reflexive property. And when it feels a creator being playing with it, it plays back. And it has a lot. It has a lot of options that we can't think about. So it's surprising, and it's interesting too, because then that keeps like it keeps me on my toes, because it can be sending me things that are great, but because it's out of my routine, it can feel off-putting, or old dog, new tricks kind of stuff. And so when you start playing with the universe, and the universe is like, oh, we got a live one, and starts playing with you, you got to be pretty, Tai Chi, go with the flow, because you're going to see some new stuff. And, stuff you don't have canned reactions for. So you're going to feel some like new, true, raw feelings. And you have to have the self-discipline not to, to be able to like incorporate that experience as it comes in, and then to continue to create and allow it to flow through you. And ultimately, I think, learn to enjoy a new sensation for what it is, without trying to make it an emotion that you're comfortable with. So I'd be like, okay, cool, this is a new emotion. I don't know how to react. I don't know how I feel about this new emotion, but let it run its course. Emotions always inform me of something when I don't shut them out. And if I shut them out and I still need to be informed, then they just come back stronger, and that creates a lot of tension in the field. So I just let it flow through. If there's one great personal thing I've learned from acting, it's if you can let raw, unfiltered emotion just flow through you when it needs to, without trying to figure it out or just whatever, just like let it just course through you. That's the best. That's the best when for like evolving, because you figure out, it'll come to light what it is, like what the root of it is, like the event or whatever you have to do, But for that period of time where you just let it flow through you, it's very liberating. You get a lot more out of it, or at least I get a lot more out of it. Because if I'm trying to process an emotion while I'm having it, then I'm trying to fit it through some like narrow point of view that I have that relates to previous emotions, and it's very comparative. But if I can just let it roll through without trying to mentally figure it out, works out better. Which, when you're being a creator being, is good, because a lot of times there's going to be a lot of energy coursing through you, and it courses through me for sure, that it's not even personal, because it's just like information coming through, wide full spectrum information for whatever this thing is that's channeling through you, whether it's whether it's like an art piece or a thing you're doing in the reality, or whatever, however you apply the creative energy, like whatever your craft is, it's coming through you. But if it's something that's a lot larger than just yourself, then there's going to be information that you don't necessarily personally relate to that's coming through you. So I don't know, for instance, if I were writing a soap opera and there was a lot of drama in it, and divorces and affairs and pregnancies and stuff, like I'm a single dude, so that's not me. But if I was doing that and it was channeling it through me, I would expect that a lot of those associated emotions would be coming through me, and storylines and perspectives and stuff that aren't my own, but that they're legitimate to channel through for, creation purposes. And so that happens a lot. And so it's helpful to be able to just let the raw, unfiltered emotions and perspectives go through and not react to every single one. Just, let them flow through. Keep that coefficient of drag low. So being a creator, it's been fun, by the way. Out of all the stuff I've done, and I've done a lot of stuff, when I was young, I realized I had a pretty good mind. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to see if I can do some stuff with this. Being a creator is probably, I don't know, no real reason to rank it, but it's one of the, I think it's the best thing I ever decided to do with my mind, to be honest. Just be a creator. And I saw the other side of the pendulum. When I was 25, I was working as an executive officer for the 5th Corps Chief of Staff of the United States Army, planning the invasion of Iraq. And we liaised with, at that level, the White House, EU, NATO, SHAPE, all those international level, geopolitical level. And that's the height of destruction. I did that. I was in that chair for a year. That was a top secret chair. And so I saw how they do it. I saw how destruction beings destroy. And I was educated in it, and I know how they do it, and I participated in it. Now, you should know that I was a conscientious objector the whole time, and I acted in accordance with that, all legally. Followed all legal directive orders and stuff. Everything was like by the book. But I made it known during my time there that I considered the war a crime against humanity, and that everything we were doing was incorrect for incorrect reasons, including my general. I was diplomatic about it, and I still served my function properly, but I was already being a creator being, and I knew that the destruction beings were learning a deep lesson, a deep, dark lesson. So I brought light and levity to the situation, but it was an inevitable lesson that all those involved needed to learn, apparently, and I've learned that with distance and by having been flowed into my positive creator life, which began with the internal journey and the internal decision of awareness. It simply began with awareness, like they say about the quantum field, of what was occurring, what was going on. And in the same life, I went from being in the top destruction office to being in top creative offices. Because I internally made some decisions and really just decided I just wanted to make sure that I was being a good person. I was using my human experience to be a good, harmonious part of creation itself. Because that's what it said in the brochure. And I'm a firm believer that the brochure, the experience, should live up to what the liturgy in the brochure says. And in that sense, Earth has definitely delivered on its brochure. And I get why a lot of souls don't want to come here. That being said, Earth, well worth it. All right, everybody, have a good one.